President Obama finding himself awfully lonely at the start of the G20 summit today. The president making the hard sell on an attack against Syria, trying to get world leaders on board, but his pleas falling on a lot of deaf ears. Fox News' Greg Palcott is here with all of the details. Greg.
You got that right, Melissa. As the region here girds for a possible U.S. military strike against Syria, President Obama is involved in his own clashes at that G20 summit in St. Petersburg. Obama and Russian President and host Vladimir Putin exchanged icy greetings today. Obama is now admitting that the U.S. basically has hit the wall with Russia regarding Syria. Putin has responded in part by branding Secretary of State Kerry a liar for his testimony before congressional committees this week. Obama is seeking support elsewhere at the gathering. He met today with Japanese Prime Minister Abe. Also, French President Hollande is expressing his support, but that's about it. There have been cold shoulders all around at this summit for the United States and President Obama. UK Prime Minister David Cameron, whose parliament has voted down backing the United States in any military strike against Syria, did reveal that his intelligence services have identified the nerve gas agent sarin on the clothing and the bodies of some of the victims of that chemical weapon attack last month in Syria. But again, the UK not involved. This as the fighting in Syria continues. The forces of Bashar al-Assad clashing with rebels in one location, a town to the north of Damascus, mainly Christian, and there have been some victims in that clash, and the government reportedly moving troops and assets around in advance of that intervention. Here in Lebanon, Melissa, the government is doing its best to remain neutral, but it's not succeeding too much. We've seen a lot of violence here, a lot of passions, a lot of refugees. The border with Syria just about 40 miles from where I'm standing. Back to you.
Greg, thanks so much. So with President Obama trying to rally support for a strike against Syria, fears are growing over who may come out on top after any attack. The increasing brutality of some rebel groups in the spotlight today. This was the cover of the New York Times. It shows 7 Syrian government soldiers about to be executed by rebel forces. An assault against the Assad regime could provide big help to Syrian rebels, but will the U.S. empower people, in some cases just as bad, if not worse than Assad? Joining me now to debate just that are Zuhdi Jasser, author of A Battle for the Soul of Islam, and Lisa Daftari, counter-terror analyst and a Fox News contributor. Welcome to both of you. Lisa, let me start with you, because that picture really getting a lot of people talking today, especially here in the U.S., about who is it exactly that would be in charge after the fall of Assad. There have been questions about, is it al-Qaeda? And if they are, Syrian rebels or the Free Syrian Army, are they just as brutal as an Assad regime? What do you say?
Right, and that's been the ongoing question for over 2 years now. Who are the rebels? That's why President Obama hesitated and is still hesitating to send weapons to the rebels. That's why we question, if we go in, well, is there a possibility that the chemical weapons could be passed off and could get into the hands of these rebels? And the last question, and the biggest question of all, is that should we strike and weaken the Assad regime, wouldn't these al-Qaeda forces then take that opportunity to swoop right in and occupy the political vacuum that would then be created?
Zuhdi, I know you disagree.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to ask a lot of questions, Melissa, but how about some answers? The answers so far have been that doing nothing is been the most empowering for al-Qaeda and all of the militant groups and radicals, and the most empowering for people like governments like Saudi Arabia and Qatar to fund the wrong people. And within the Free Syria armies, not only the 50 to 100,000 that are actually fighting, but around Syria. Remember, this revolution started urban and then moved to the towns of Damascus and Aleppo, each of 2 to 4 million people that include many hundreds of thousands of local coordination committees that are helping the rebels. So to say that the rebels, 5 to 10,000 al-Qaeda, are going to take over Syria, certainly the Islamists will have a lot of influence, but you can't tell me that Syria's local coordination committees are going to tip towards Islamists. And if they do, it's going to happen much more likely under the Assad regime than afterwards.
But Lisa, I mean, he's talking about the folks that are backed by al-Qaeda. That is one splinter group, but there are 2 other groups as well that are part of the extremists. Right. There's the Free Islamic Front. There's also the Syrian Liberation Front that are out there as well, who are groups that, we may not want in charge. The Free Syrian Army is the faction that I think people have seen as the most moderate. But we don't know that they're the ones that would necessarily be in charge if Assad went, right?
No, we don't know who's going to be in charge, and that's doing nothing has not been an answer, and Zuhdi's absolutely correct in saying that. But doing something and failing is probably much worse than doing nothing. And in this case, we don't know who these people are, and the devil that we know is often better than the devil that we don't know. But what we do know is to take examples from history and to look at these other political uprisings where a very well-intentioned grassroots opposition uprising didn't result into what the people wanted.
Yeah.
It didn't result into what the people who gave up their lives were fighting for. And in this case, the one golden rule that we've seen in the Middle East and we've seen throughout the Arab Spring is that it's not going to be the group that started it, but it's going to be the group that's the most well organized and well funded. And in this case, the Islamists are going to be the group that's going to have that
wait,
advantage.
Hang on, Zuhdi. The other really big problem we have at this point, and we saw it at the G20 summit today, is that this is becoming a proxy battle between the U.S. and Russia. And there have been questions raised about Vladimir Putin saying he may come to the aid of Syria. He could replace whatever weapons are destroyed. There's even a question being raised during the hearings that we saw yesterday in Washington of folks asking, would it be legitimate for the Russians to strike out against us in a military theater if we went in and attacked Syria? And some people saying, yes, this is absolutely a possibility. So shouldn't we be concerned about the fact that while we may want to help Syrians, we may be getting into a war with Russia here, or a battle at least?
But I hope that concern doesn't make us retract and basically make the world a post-American world where the Russias and Irans of the world control the future of the Middle East, which would tip towards the most anti-American environment possible. And currently, yes, the Syrian military has a deep history of being trained by the Soviets. There's deep relationships there. The economy's been intertwined with the Russians, and not to mention the triangular relationship with Iran that's at play here. But, this is the time, too bad we don't have somebody like President Reagan to lead us with conviction and leadership to get American opinion to where it should be. But this should not allow, retraction at this time will allow the worst of the worst. Hezbollah, Assad, remember, has this cozy relationship with radical groups and uses the flux of al-Qaeda into that country to force the moderates to disappear and destroy them. And if we want Syria to evolve into a third pathway towards democracy, it's not going to happen under Assad. And if we want to contain Iran, contain Russia's influence away from radicalization in the Middle East, it needs to start with putting up a wall now because of the chemical weapons and destroying their capabilities militarily from the air.
We got to leave it there. Thanks to both of you. I'm sorry, Lisa. We'll get more next time. Thank you so much.
Okay.